For most of human history, people believed they bought things because they needed them. Food to survive, clothes to protect, tools to work, shelter to endure. Consumption was practical, rational, and bounded by necessity. Then, something changed. People began buying things not for what they did, but for what they said. And once that shift happened, spending stopped being about survival and became about status. This wasn't a modern invention. It didn't begin with social media, influencers, or advertising algorithms. Long before Instagram and credit cards, one economist noticed something deeply uncomfortable. Much of economic behavior had nothing to do with usefulness at all. It had everything to do with being seen, with signaling rank, with proving, quietly or loudly, that you belonged above others. He realized consumption wasn't just economic behavior. It was social performance. And once you see that, you start to understand why so many people work harder, spend more, and feel poorer than they should. Welcome to Financial Timeline, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand why Thorstein Veblen mattered, you have to understand the world he was observing. Late 19th century America was transforming at breakneck speed. Railroads stitched continents together. Steel, oil, and finance created fortunes almost overnight. A small elite accumulated staggering wealth, while millions crowded into factories and cities, living lives that were exhausting, fragile, and tightly constrained. This was the Gilded Age. Gilded, not golden. On the surface, it gleamed. Beneath it, inequality widened. And crucially, that inequality wasn't hidden. It was displayed. The wealthy didn't just possess money, they performed it. Mansions rose along coasts and city avenues. Servants multiplied. Leisure became elaborate, visible, theatrical, expensive clothing, extravagant dinners, long vacations, unproductive hobbies. Wealth announced itself loudly. What made this era different wasn't just how much wealth existed. It was how deliberately it was shown. At the same time, a growing middle class watched from below. They weren't factory workers, but they weren't tycoons either. Yet they were surrounded by images of elite life, and those images began redefining what success looked like. Comfort was no longer enough. Respectability required imitation. The distance between classes wasn't bridged by earning more alone, but by spending more visibly. This was the environment Veblen stepped into. Veblen didn't think like the economists of his time. Raised in a frugal immigrant household, he valued restraint over display. He was skeptical of authority, unimpressed by wealth, often an outsider in elite institutions, and that outsider position gave him a powerful advantage. He watched how rich people behaved when they didn't think they were being judged, and he noticed something economics wasn't supposed to notice. Classical economics assumed people were rational actors, maximizing utility, weighing costs and benefits, minimizing waste. But what Veblen saw didn't fit that model at all. He saw people paying more precisely because something was expensive. He saw impractical clothing designed to restrict movement, homes built to impress guests, not to provide comfort, leisure treated as an achievement, and work as something to escape. In short, he saw behavior that only made sense if the goal wasn't usefulness, but status. This behavior wasn't random. It was patent, predictable, structured. Veblen realized consumption wasn't about satisfying needs. It was about communicating position, showing you didn't need to work with your hands, that you had time to waste, that you could afford inefficiency. In a society built on productivity, the ultimate signal of success became visible non-productivity. Doing nothing expensively became proof that you'd already won. And once consumption becomes signaling, economic logic changes. There is no finish line in a status race, because the goal isn't satisfaction, it's differentiation. Modern economies, Veblen argued, weren't just systems of production and exchange. They were systems of comparison, and comparison has no natural limit. Veblen wasn't moralizing. What unsettled him wasn't the wealth itself, it was the waste. Waste of resources, waste of effort, waste of human potential. People exhorting themselves to maintain appearances, families stretching finances to keep up, societies rewarding display over substance, an economy quietly training people to confuse spending with success. And here's the dangerous part. If consumption is about signaling, then financial freedom becomes harder as societies grow richer, because the pressure to display never disappears. It intensifies. The richer the society, the more elaborate the signals, the subtler the markers, the higher the cost of appearing normal. Veblen called this mechanism conspicuous consumption. Not consumption for comfort, not for utility, consumption designed to be seen. A coat didn't just keep you warm. A house didn't just shelter you. A watch didn't just tell time. They announced status. He went further. It wasn't just what people bought, it was how they used their time. He called it conspicuous leisure. The ability to avoid productive labor became a signal in itself. Leisure stopped being rest. It became performance. Travel. Events. Hobbies that produced nothing tangible. Not escapes from work, proof that work was optional. In a productive economy, efficiency should be rewarded. But socially, inefficiency became prestigious. The more waste you could afford, the higher your position appeared. Fragile objects were superior to durable ones. Restrictive clothing signaled refinement. Uselessness became value. Once Veblen saw this, everything else fell into place. Elite behavior set the standard. Those standards filtered downward. What began as elite display became middle-class aspiration. What began as imitation became pressure. The middle class stretched, borrowed, sacrificed stability for appearance, not to be extravagant, but to look legitimate. In a visual society, invisibility feels like failure, and this system never resolves. Someone always has more. Something is always newer. Taste is always being updated. Consumption becomes a treadmill, disguised as progress. Ironically, rising incomes don't end the pressure. They raise the price of entry. Veblen understood something modern economics later formalized. In certain markets, higher prices don't reduce demand. They create Italiano. When value lies in signaling, price becomes part of the product. Lowering it destroys its purpose. This is why luxury works the way it does. The price filters, the silence signals belonging. The product is secondary. Modern marketing didn't invent this logic. It refined Italiano. Social media didn't create conspicuous consumption. It industrialized it. Consumption is now constant, curated, documented, and rewarded. Even restraint can become performance. Minimalism, wellness, productivity, same logic, different packaging. Veblen wasn't anti-wealth. His warning was subtler and more unsettling. When societies confuse display with value, they train people to chase signals instead of substance. Real wealth doesn't need an audience. It buys time, optionality, resilience. But those don't photograph well. They don't trend. They don't impress strangers. So they're undervalued. Veblen exposed this contradiction over a century ago, not to shame individuals, but to reveal the game. Because once you see conspicuous consumption for what it is, a social technology, not a personal failure, you gain perspective. You can choose when to participate and when not to. History doesn't repeat, but the incentives do. And if you don't understand the incentives shaping your behavior, they will quietly shape your future. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe to Financial Timeline. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.